Hello, I'm Doug, and this is the Taste and Sensibility channel. And today we're having another episode of 10 Tastes for Whiskey Drinkers. And the taste of the day is rye whiskey. And this is aimed mostly at bourbon drinkers because rye is part of a bourbon mash bill, usually. Unless it's a wheated bourbon where that small fraction that's often rye has been replaced by wheat. But mostly people doing bourbons want the spiciness of the rye, and that's what it provides. So we're going to go through a few different categories of rye whiskeys here, and they will help you get your bearings in the whiskey world and in the bourbon world. So I have two Canadian rye whiskeys that are 100% rye. And I have two American rye whiskeys called barely legal ryes because they only have about 51% rye and the rest is corn to give some sweetness or to make it more like a bourbon. Then I've got three American ryes here that are 100% rye and or 95% rye and 5% malted barley. That's what these are. And then these are older ones, more gourmet, just higher end, their age mostly. So I've only got one glass per category here, so I don't mind a little contamination. But the first thing is Canadian Club 100% rye. Get a little acetone on the nose. Wow. Lots of these ryes have some pretty strong flavors, punchy, spicy, strong things, but these Canadian ones just don't do it. Canadian Club wants to be known as smooth. And they are trying to be very friendly and not pushy or poke out too much in any one direction. So the Canadian Club certainly comes across as a rye, but it's very soft, smooth, easy. Nothing's really hot or prominent. So this says 40%, as I suspected. So there's a graininess to it, there's a sweetness, but it doesn't come across as a corn sweetness. Doesn't taste old, it's not very complex, but you know it's rye and it's not offensive. So it is a good entry point to people who aren't used to rye. And it will definitely give you some of the notes and flavors and aromas. It's a little grassy and herbal. Overall, you can tell it's rye. And then it's pretty simple. So I think I'm about done with that. I should have had a dump glass. Let's drink it. Now, moving on to Crown Royal Northern Harvest Rye. 90% rye whiskey, fine blended Canadian whiskey, 45% ABV. Not really picking up the higher proof on the nose, or a lot of notes on the nose. But taste-wise, Crown Royal's a little bit sweeter. The rye notes are not quite as prominent as they were on the Canadian Club. A little herbal, a little grassiness. The rye notes are a little softer. Not sure I even get the rye bread that I usually get in a lot of ryes. So even with the increased proof, this is an easy drinking rye whiskey. It is not offensive in any way. So people are not going to have trouble drinking these for the most part. Now on to the barely legal rye. So let's start with the Wild Turkey 101. This comes in a liter bottle. It's kind of hard to find, but when you find it, you know, some good store in your area that has Wild Turkey products has probably got this around. You just got to look in the right spot for it. And 51% rye leaves a lot of room for corn. They're probably putting 5 or 10% malted barley in there. And the rest of that space can be taken up by corn, which gives it a nice sweetness and would be very familiar to bourbon drinkers. So it's doing blind tastings. It's very hard to tell between a barely legal rye and a high rye bourbon. So on the nose, I would say, oh, that reminds me of Wild Turkey. I love Wild Turkey 101 bourbon. It's wonderful because of the rye content and the way they treat the way they age it. Barrels they use, the entry proof, is different than a lot of other distilleries. This is pretty easy. There's rye notes there, grassy, herbal, bready, rye bread, and sweet. There's a corniness to it that bourbon drinkers would recognize. Oh, that's pretty good. And the proof carries a lot of flavor with it. It's stronger than either of these two. So yeah, it's definitely related to Wild Turkey 101 bourbon. Now I have a dump glass. I'm going to move on to Pikesville, which is 55% ABV, so 110 proof. And it's a Heaven Hill product. Probably about the same juice as Rittenhouse Rye. And it's just higher proof and aged longer, maybe. What does it say? This whiskey is aged at least 6 years. This is older and stronger than the Rittenhouse. Oh yeah. There's rye in that. And it's a little herbal and bready, rye bread. Grainy. Very different than a bourbon, but definitely leaning, it's leaning in the bourbon direction. I'm not sure the corn, there's not sweetness there like the Wild Turkey had. Yeah, that would not be offensive. That would be a good rye to start out on. If people are used to higher proofs, I'm not sure they want the aggressive bite of some of these other rye whiskeys. Pikesville is just great. Lots of people say it's their favorite rye. These are bourbon drinkers, familiar friends. Bulleit is famous for being from MGP and their 95.5 mash bill. So Bulleit didn't have their own distillery for a while. So their bourbon, like the rye, came from MGP, which is a large industrial distillery in Lawrenceburg, Indiana. And they are rye specialists, and they do bourbons and other things there too. But they are really good at rye. Much more rye character on the nose, which I often miss. This is grassy, herbal, rye bread. Oh yeah, much stronger. Lots of people report licorice notes. Lots of people report dill when they're drinking ryes, and I get dill in some of these, but I never, ever, ever get licorice, and I love black licorice. So there's something in my brain or tasting apparatus that makes me interpret all these notes as other things and not ever licorice. And other people would drink the same stuff and go, "Oh, it tastes like licorice. I hate that. I can't drink that." This is just more rye punch. All the things that you taste hints of in these things, there's lots of it here. So rye bread, a hint of dill, a spiciness at the end. people are always debating whether they're tasting alcohol or rye spices. Rye spiciness, I should say. So here, it's the same sort of thing. I'm not getting the heat or the pop on the finish that I get on Wild Turkey products, but this is 45% ABV, so 90 proof. So it's fairly well behaved. It's very tasty. There's more rye notes than you get with these other things, for the most part. So that is good and very interesting. Next we move on to George Dickel, which is MGP juice, but they run it through their Tennessee whiskey Lincoln County process. So I think they must get it young and do that charcoal mellowing step through maple wood charcoal. And then they age it in the barrels after that charcoal step. Smell is very similar to the Bulleit. Once you've had quite a few ryes, you'll go, oh, that's the stuff that makes bourbon taste interesting. Bourbon has a corn sweetness, there's often cherry, vanilla, and spiciness can come out of the wood. Sometimes bitterness if it's been aged for a long time. And a lot of that spiciness and interest comes from the rye that's in the mash bill. So this Dickel Rye is just a slightly softer version of this. It's tasty, it's good, I like it. I get grassiness, I get a little more dill. The rye bread's definitely there, and I think this is on the order of 90 proof. Yep. So this is tasty, I like it. I think it's one of Bart's favorite ryes on Scotch Test Dummies. So these are very similar. And so I don't need to finish this glass. But now, this is a unicorn. Balcones Distilling Texas Rye 100 proof. Pot distilled 100% rye whiskey. So there's no malted barley, and then they use Elban Rye from Northwest Texas. Accompanied by some crystal chocolate and roasted rye that gives us a rich, sweet mid-palate and layers of chocolate over leather, tobacco, oat, and spice notes. I would just say oak. It is complex. There are lots of things going on. Balcones doesn't have great distribution throughout the country, but some people can get it. I'm in Louisiana, which is right next door, and we get these products. This is sitting on the shelf for about 40 bucks. And I'm going to have to get another one because this is going down fast. I've done a tour at Balcones Distilling, and it's they're doing some wild things. It's a new frontier in the whiskey world. So I don't get so many rye notes on the nose. It's a little grassy and herbal, but I can't really tell it's a rye. I'm getting oak and smoke and char also. But when it hits your palate, you know. Whoa, that is oaky. There's a brown part of the oak and there's a green part of the oak. I think there's a lot of green notes from the rye. That's all that's survived. It doesn't taste like any of these, any of these, any of these. It's a whole different thing. It's green and herbal and oak. Oh, I just got a hit of the coffee that they're talking about. Coffee and chocolate. Okay, yeah, it's complex. It takes a while to dissect it. You could get a lot off the nose too, but I don't have time for that right now. But this is just so different than all the rest of them. So it's a 100% American rye whiskey, but they're doing different things with their mash bill, and they're doing different things with their aging. That makes it not like any other rye you've had. So this is worth a look. Okay, so this is an oddball and a unicorn, but one of my favorites. Okay, I guess that's a dump glass. And now, okay, I haven't decided to do the whistle pig or the barrel. So one of the odd things about rye, or not necessarily odd, but just different, is that rye whiskey ages faster, or it's ready, it seems mature. People want to go, oh yeah, that's ready to drink at a younger age than bourbons are. So if you taste a 4-year bourbon, you'll go, that kind of tastes young. And then, some Bookers come out at 6 and 7 years. Wild Turkey is often very close to 8 years. Wild Turkey bourbon is close to 8 years and up. And there's lots of Knob Creeks that are 9, 10, 11, depending on store picks and things like that. Elijah Craig Barrel Proof is 12 years old. They pick up more things. They get more complex. They get more interesting in the barrel. And you often don't want to drink them when they're only 4 and 5 years old. But rye whiskey might be ready at 2 years, or 3 years, or 4 years. And I've had a really good Bulleit Rye at 4 years. It's just, wow, it's ready to go. But these are exceptions. This is a 10-year whistle pig, and this is a 13-year barrel rye. So this is a single barrel that the company picked up somewhere, probably Canadian. I think the whistle pig's Canadian too. They're just now making their own juice and incorporating that into some of their releases. But this barrel, I'll just pour one of these. But as rye ages, all the rye notes soften and get so much softer and moderated. So you might get kicked around by some of these other 100% ryes. They can be sharp and the notes can be strong, and you realize why you only want 20% or 30% in a bourbon, because they take over everything. But when you age it longer, it just softens, calms down, gets smoother, quieter, more subtle, more nuanced. So I've really been enjoying learning about how rye ages, and that's what these bottles are about. So this barrel rye is cask strength, so strong. Let me find it here. 64% ABV, 128 plus proof. So very likely all rye. And it's good. It is not strong. It doesn't punch you. You can tell it's rye, and you can tell it's old. It's picked up some oak. And the combination of oak and rye is worlds apart from this combination of oak and rye. So this is the slow way, and this is the fast way. And they come out with different results. This is really good. This will give you some idea of how bourbons might age when they go to older ages, like 13 years for this one. All the spiky, pointy rye notes that made a younger bourbon so interesting are getting softened up and going away faster than some of the other flavors in the bourbon. The corn sweetness is probably still there, but the spirit influence is dwindling and the oak influence is increasing. So that is really good. And I think I'm done. So if you haven't done an exploration of rye whiskey and you're a bourbon drinker, you should have done some of the research by now. So I hope I pointed out a few things about Canadians, about barely legals, about 100% American ryes, and about these older expressions that are real interesting. That is another 10 tastes for whiskey drinkers. And if you like this review, please give this video a thumbs up. Please leave a comment down below or a question, and let me know what you're thinking about all these different things if you've had any of these ryes. And subscribe to the channel and click on that bell to get notified when the new videos come out on Mondays and Thursdays. So stay tuned for another 10 Tastes episode, and that's all for now.
I love whiskey drinking women. They understand the things I do. They never beg me to stop drinking, 'cause they like drinking whiskey too. Sufficient